Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Mindful Place Summit. I'm your host, Crystal Jensen, and today we're sitting down with Mr. Chazz Lewis. He's on a mission in life to enjoy the process of becoming the best version of himself and helping others do the same. His vision is to help adults see, guide, and trust children. He goes by Mr. Chazz, and he even has a song to prove it. He's an educational specialist who teaches teachers to teach in a chain of child development centers. He closely works with 8 different schools, hundreds of teachers, and thousands of children. He has trained thousands of teachers in person and virtually, and he's also earned his master's in executive leadership at American University. He has over 180,000 followers on TikTok, as well as 100,000 followers on Instagram. Make sure you follow him, and he's also in the process of writing a book, as well as his own podcast called Mr. Chazz's Leadership, Parenting, and Teachers Podcast. You can find him inside the Mindful Play community. So make sure you have a listen, and thanks so much for watching. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I have Chazz Lewis here. He is an educational specialist and a parent coach. Welcome, Chazz.
Thanks for having me here. I'm happy to be here. Excited for the conversation.
I am super excited. So for those of you that may or may not know, I am one of Chazz's biggest fans. I follow him online. He has been a very big inspiration for me as an educator. So as we move through a little bit about his story, make some notes, inspired actions, and we'll tell you how to get in touch with him at the end of our conversation. So Chazz, can you let us know a little bit about yourself and, what got you into the line of work that you're currently doing?
Yeah, that's actually a very long answer, but I'm going to kind of give you the more condensed version. So I really started to work in a childcare facility, not because I always loved children and not one, but really I was just looking for a job, and my friend had just got a job there and they were looking for other people. And so I just applied and I got the job, and I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Um, I did have some natural skill in being able to connect and talk to children, but I really struggled with the helping them through conflict, with helping them, through their challenges, especially when they had to do with each other. And like I understood the gravity of what I was doing. I'm impacting the next generation of humans, but I didn't know if I was doing like harm or like good or neutral. And so that was really stressful, because a lot of times I go in these situations and I'm trying to like use logic to like help them work it out. And a lot of times I would feel like it would make it worse. And that was really stressful for me. So I really started to seek out like just mentors, new information, podcasts, books, a lot of reflection, a lot of daily reflection, after every day, after every shift, really kind of thinking about the different things that happen, and, and really kind of picking it apart and having conversations with as many people, as anyone who's willing to talk to me about it, just so I can kind of like unpack things and learn and grow. Fast forward, I did become a lot better at, understanding children and what they needed, how to help them through conflict, classroom leadership. Like I grew a lot. And, I had my own class, and I recognized that people started to come to me for advice and like, hey, such and such is happening. What do I do? I noticed like you have like some of those challenging kids, but somehow like you make it through the day. I need some help, right? And so it's kind of just these casual conversations in the break room where, I'm sharing advice like, oh yeah, maybe, he's doing that because of that. Try this, and then also try this and see what happens. And they would come back with, wow, that like really made the world of difference. Like that made like his day better, that made my day better. Like I need more. And that's when kind of one of the first light bulbs started to go off. And I was like, hey, like, I love the impact that I'm making with my, 20 humans in the community that I'm creating. But what if I could make, an impact, not just impact the 20 little humans in their formative years, but I can impact, multiple teachers. And then my impact would be exponential. Instead of just impacting 20 humans, I can impact, hundreds of of Tiny Humans by way of impacting the teachers and helping teachers work through some challenges and helping to really understand the children and helping them work through things. Um, and so I became an educational specialist, which is like I teach teachers to teach. I do 101 other things too. Sometimes I'm covering for a director, sometimes I'm doing observations inside, outside of the classroom. I'm able to do camera observations, all those things. And so even just just that process was a really big learning experience and solidified some of the ideas that I already had. Because when you see, when you meet thousands of children and you start to realize like, like these things are normal, these things, you start to see similarities and temperaments of children. Like every child is unique and is their own person, but start to see a lot of patterns, reoccurring patterns, and different things that different temperaments of children respond to differently. Um, and so, just by working with teachers and directors and children, I really grew there. And so I was really fulfilled because I'm working with hundreds of teachers and thousands of children, making this exponential impact that I envisioned before. But then the pandemic happened, and the kids went home, the parents went home, a lot of teachers went home, and I still just had this drive to help, to make an impact and to help teachers who are struggling, people who are struggling to understand children and to guide children. And even in my job as an educational specialist, I had like there was a certain kind of like attention that I paid to new teachers, because I remember what that felt like when I was new and I didn't know what to do, and that stress in my body, right? And so even as an educational specialist, I worked with a lot of veteran teachers, but I know that I made it a point to meet every new teacher. Like, oh, you're new. Like, we're gonna be friends. I'm gonna get to know you. We're gonna have a connection, so that we can, you feel safe to, to learn from me. And so that happened. But when the pandemic happened and everyone went home, including me, for a period of time. A lot of our centers were still open, but I, went home for maybe like a month or two. I really started to see how parents were really struggling, and a lot of things that they were struggling with. I'm like, I totally have answers to that. Like, I totally like the things they're struggling. Like, and the classic examples, like, oh, my child's coloring on the wall, and I don't know what to do. Like, I told them to stop 100 times, and they won't stop. Like, okay, well, it's part of it is like 2-year-olds need to color and paint with their whole body, and so that's one thing you want to give them opportunity to do that, but also telling them what to do instead of what not to do. It's going to be a lot more effective and a lot more helpful than just saying, don't do this, don't do this. And so like there were all these things that I was seeing, and that I was like, I totally have, like, I can help out with that. I can help with that. So I started to create content where I would, and my whole thing was I want to create enjoyable content that's enjoyable to consume, but also at the end of the video, you feel like you've learned something, you've grown a little bit, your perspective has grown just a little bit. And so I started to create TikTok videos, and that's really where the TikTok videos really started to blow up. I started posting on Instagram, and two, simultaneously, I was also going on TikTok live every day for hours and hours on end. Just here, come ask questions. I'm here to help. I'm going to answer your questions. I'm going to, I'm here. And so, and I remember like there were so many times where I would just be on and be on, like, okay, I'm only gonna do this for an hour. I end up doing it for hours. I'm like, hey, I really do have to leave because I'm hungry and I got to meet my own needs. And so, that's kind of where I started to focus more on helping parents with their children. And it's really kind of grown from there. To now I have like the Patreon, because someone on the live said, hey, like I would totally pay for this service that you're providing for us for free. Like, do you have you heard of Patreon? And so, one of like my listeners one of my regulars who would show up said, hey, why don't you do Patreon? And so like, hey, I've never thought about monetizing or anything like that. I was just here to help, but that's not a bad idea. And so I have the Patreon where I offer different services, where I bring people on, um, people who have different expertise, professionals in the field, and answer your questions. And we have conversations about different topics. Um, and you get access to that. And it's kind of like a podcast. Well, it is a podcast, but it's a podcast that you can attend live and be a part of. But there's also one-on-one coaching that you can get access to depending on the tier level that you sign up for. So that's kind of how it all grew and progressed, and that's how we got here.
Oh, I love your story. I'm like sitting over here attentively listening. And what I love about it is that when you felt resistance, when you first came in as an educator and you didn't have all the answers, you knew where to go to get your answers. You reached out. That's that courageous, bold piece where it's like, then all of a sudden you became this leader in your field and inspiring others just by showing up and transitioning and saying, hey, this pandemic is here now. How can I continue to show up for my people? And, if there's a lesson that I've learned along the way is, the message that you have, the message that I have, the message that these educators, these inspired teachers or parents have, just by showing up like you are, it's like inspiring those around you to also show up. Right. It's like, hey, Chazz didn't have all the answers. I don't have all the answers. And that's okay. It's having that, oh, you know what? I am going to go out and discover what that answer is because I'm curious. And that curious approach has created something that is just absolutely inspiring. And I'm going to post your Instagram link below. And I encourage all of our listeners to go in and check it out because there's so many free resources. And we're going to dive in a little bit today and talk a little bit about, how to discipline in an emotional, healthy way. But I wanted to flag that down below, popping on, seeing what Chazz has to offer on his Instagram page. I know I'm a follower and I just love eating it all up. TikTok, I've been kind of veering my way in there and been watching and stuff like that. And I'm trying to figure out where does Teacher Crystal fit in this beautiful piece, which we kind of talked about that. But it's fun. It's fun and engaging. And I don't think I've ever listened to one of your videos that I didn't walk away with a little nugget going, it's awareness and perspective. Right? Awareness and perspective. So let's dive into, disciplining in an emotionally healthy way. What does that look like for you, Chazz?
Yeah. A lot of times we have, and a lot of us kind of grew up with this punishment, kind of like, you do something wrong, you don't meet the expectations. The response is like, I'm going to punish you into you meeting the expectations. And really the approach that I take and I teach others to take is to really see what that underlying need is and those unlearned skills are, and looking at it and looking at behavior as communication, right? And so these misbehaviors are, these behaviors that concern us are usually communicating something to us. And instead of dismissing it and punishing a response, um, we can really hear what they're saying emotionally, what their body's saying, what those underlying needs are, what skills they need to learn and develop, and we can help them with that. And when we respond with, with hitting children, with shaming children, with just punishing children, then it takes away the opportunity to look within and say, okay, what's missing here? What am I having a hard time with? And for very young children, they're not going to be able to necessarily figure out, like the example I said earlier, they're not going to figure out that, like, hey, I'm a 2-year-old and I need to paint and color with my whole body. And I see these crowns, I see this wall, they're going to be like, I'm making the connection I'm going to make here is that I can color here. This is what my body's telling me to do. This is this need, this that is important, that is young at me to do this thing. And and unbeknownst to that 2-year-old and a lot of us adults, it's a very common, normal 2-year-old need. And us as the adult can help the 2-year-old, even the 2-year-old, look like, I see, you want to color, you want to paint on something big and large. here's an easel. We're going to put up some cardboard. You can do it because easels, maybe not everyone has access to an easel, but everyone has access to cardboard. Everyone gets Amazon box. If you don't, your neighbor, someone does. You can go on trash day and walk around and get some cardboard boxes. If you really don't have access to cardboard boxes, which I think is rare, um, and they can meet that need. One, we can help them identify that they have this need and help them meet that need in more appropriate ways. I always say that children, especially young children, they intuitively know everything they need to do for their body, for their brain to grow and to develop, right? That 2-year-old knows that they need to climb, right? It's built into their body, right? But they may not necessarily know where to climb or the appropriate place or the safe place to climb. And that's where we can come in, right? And we can say, like, I see you really want to climb. We can't climb on got something in my beard. You can't climb on the oven because it's hot, but you can climb on the couch or you can climb on the stairs, or this is the place where you can climb, right? Um, Even with things like hitting, we see hitting and we think, and I get these messages on Instagram all the time, like, how do I stop hitting? How do I get my child to stop hitting, right? And really more of what we should be doing and thinking about, the more helpful, way to think about is, okay, like, what skills are my child lacking and how can I help them develop these skills, right? So they're hitting because someone took their toy and they don't know how to get it back. Or they might be hitting because they're overcrowded and there's someone in their space and they don't necessarily have the skills to say, excuse me, you're in my space. I'm feeling a little claustrophobic and it's starting to trigger me right now. Will you please move 2 feet to the side? That 2-year-old is not going to communicate in that way. And really, even if the 2-year-old could communicate in that way, I don't know many other 2-year-olds who are going to always, follow the directions. So these are, or like, listen to that 2-year-old articulating themselves. So it's a really tricky situation, right? They don't have the skills. They're trying to figure out how to navigate this situation, and it's tough for them. And so instead of hitting them to teach them that, you shouldn't hit, we can see where they're struggling and like why they're hitting and help them with the skills and articulating their needs, or going to get a grown up if they need to, if the situation is too much outside of their skill set and too much for them to handle, then go get a grown up, and then we can go and we can help them work through that. And even by then, we're modeling, and depending on where they're at developmentally and depending on what's happening in the child, like those are all variables that will depend on what you say. But it's about helping it's about helping children with their problems as opposed to making them feel bad for having problems. Some things, and very quick, because I know I've been talking for a long time, but Tissy, do that. Okay. You said 15 minutes, like, sometimes.
Yeah, 20, 25. I'm going to keep you on as long as I can.
Not with me. With me, it's never just 15, 20 minutes. I have a tendency to talk and share because I'm just really passionate about like helping and getting this information out there. So, sometimes before we do create that boundary, sometimes it's about validating. Well, a lot of times it's about validating how they're feeling and validating their experience so they feel seen first. So then we can move into more of the guidance, right? When you're going to be a lot less likely to listen and to be guided by someone who you feel doesn't see you or understand even what's happening in the moment. And a lot of times we have a tendency we'll see the last part, we'll just see like that, child hit, and then, that's all we focus on, as opposed to I see you got really frustrated because Joey took your toy. That made you really mad. You got really frustrated, and so you hit Joey. and then allowing him to talk, allowing that child to talk. And then what's likely going to happen, they're going to further express and talk about what happened and how they felt. And, he should not, still not take my toy. It's my toy. He took it. All that, allow them to express how they feel and, what happened. And through this process, not only are they practicing articulating their wants and needs and feelings, which is part of the skill that we're trying to build. They're also now, once they've been heard out and they've been seen, they're also a lot more open. Their brain is a lot more open to receiving feedback or the boundary or what to do instead. How else do we solve that problem? And so, yeah, that is kind of briefly talking about how to discipline in an emotionally healthy way, as opposed to the way that most of us grew up.
I can speak a little bit on that, and thank you, because as you're talking, so many little thoughts come to my mind. And for our listeners and yourself and myself, hands up if you resonate with, if you're, my upbringing, it was, okay, something has gone on and I'm crying, go to your room, close the door. And I think there was this innate, like, I don't want to deal with it, because maybe my perception is that some parents just don't know how to deal with it, right? So then maybe their upbringing, it's this perpetual cycle that their parents didn't deal with it, so then they were taught not to ever deal with it. And then as this child goes to the room to cry and it's not talked about or integrated in, and it's just kind of pushed down, pushed down, pushed down. And then now I feel like generation that we are in, we are like, we want to talk about our feelings. We want to talk about where we're at. And I'm so inspired by, the work that you're doing, because you're allowing parents to also be seen and giving them the tools, because there's a lot of parents out there that are sending their children to cry in their room because they don't know how to emotionally support them. So by supporting the parent emotionally and giving them this toolkit, these tools to approach the child from more of a whole parent or educator perspective. And I love when you say, like, behaviors or communication, because a lot of the times, if we're not giving our attention to the child, or we're seeing the back end of a scenario, it's easy for us to have this expectation that this child should know better, but the child's coming to us to learn. And if we don't know how to handle that, then we just shut it down as well. So everything you're saying completely resonates with me. And, as you move through talking, all of these little, sparks of inspiration come. And I'm kind of honing into my own parenting, where I look at all my children, different ages and stages, and I was a different parent at different ages and stages, and to reflect with no judgment on the stories that my children tell me, or the lessons that they've learned based on who I was as a parent, is pretty neat to kind of observe with no judgment, and looking at how I've basically changed my awareness of parenting, my awareness as an educator has completely supported me in supporting the emotions of the children I support, right? It's like this beautiful little ripple kind of domino effect. So thank you for sharing that with me. And I'm, definitely resonating with all of your lessons and all of the content that you're putting out. And from the bottom of my heart, keep producing that content, keep inspiring, because I know our listeners are connecting.
You couldn't stop me if you tried.
Yes.
And you said something else earlier, children should, you said a few things, but one thing I would definitely want to hone in on is, the whole thing that children should know better, right? And, we always say that, you should know better, children should know better. And sometimes we'll use that as the reasoning to do things to them. But, there's a gap between, what like what you may intellectually know and what you do. And there's a gap for all of us, right? And what sits in that gap is the things, the skills and the needs that we need to meet and focus on and to help them work through. Instead of just saying, you should know better. There's plenty of things, right? So one example that I love to give is that we all know what the speed limit is, right? We all go on the highway, know what the speed limit is, whether it's 55 or 60, whatever it is. But I don't see many people actually driving the actual speed limit, right? And we all know that there were people who thought very hard about, making the speed limit, and there was a reason why the speed limit is the speed limit in that place, right? We all know. And the other thing is like it's safety, right? Because people will say, oh, you should know better. Like I needed like I'm using the fact that it's a safety issue as a reason for like, yeah, I don't spank, but unless it's a safety issue, but I will spank if it's a safety issue. But that's something that is a big safety issue too, driving above the speed limit on the road. Not only are you endangering yourself, but you're endangering many innocent people on the road who you don't know. And it's this huge metal machine that could crush and kill any of us, right? Us knowing all of that, we will still speed. And we have all the, I'm just going with the flow of traffic, right? Which is kind of like the adult version of, well, he's doing it, they did it, so I'm doing it too, right? Or I'm in a rush, right? I'm in a rush, so I'm speeding because I'm trying to make up time. And the unlearned skill there is time management, right? Of actually planning out your day, your morning to leave on time so that you don't have to speed, right? And these are things that are, I'm not saying these are things that are easy to do, because yeah, sure, other variables come up, as other variables come up for children too, right? So it's maybe something happens unexpected in the morning, and then it's also just the perspective of like, yeah, maybe I am going to be a little late, and I can just call ahead and let them know. Right? There's all these reasons, there's all these things that we can do, and I'm sure there's nothing that I said that people who have a hard time getting, being on time. I'm sure you've heard it all before, right? But it's more about the practice of doing so, of the practice of doing those things, right? Yeah, you know that you should just leave on time, but it's just because you know it doesn't mean it's easy to do it, right? Yeah, I know I shouldn't hit you to get my toy back, but just because I know it doesn't mean it's easy for me to not do it, right? And so, like, I think there's a great opportunity for empathy here when children know better, but still make the mistake or still slip up or still do the thing, even though they intellectually know it. And a lot of it has to do with how they're regulated, right? Unmet needs, right? Because if just like you, oh no, I'm gonna get like, I don't feel safe to be able to call ahead and say that I'm gonna be late for work because they're gonna fire me. And so that may push you more to, okay, I need to speed, right? And for the child, it may look like, oh no, like I, you know, like I really want this adult's connection, and they're giving it to someone else, and that brings up emotions in me. And so like I really want the connection, I really want to feel safe, and so I'm going to find my way to meet the need and have this caregiver come to me, right? And whether it's hitting a child, whether it's standing on a table, whether it's whatever, because they're seeking that connection. And instead of just hitting them or shaming them or all these other things that we do to children to get them to stop a behavior, seeing them, helping them see that within themselves, and like helping them understand their own needs and how to meet those needs in more appropriate ways is how you teach. And when I say, discipline is teaching, right? So it's about teaching children to look within. Oh, I have all this energy in my body, like I gotta move, like I have all this energy in my body. Oh, instead of jumping on the couch because I know that's against the rule, or instead of climbing on the oven because I know it's like not safe, and whatever the reasons are, I'm going to go to the playroom, or I'm going to ask if we can have a dance party, or I'm going to ask if we can go outside, or I'm going to roll around on the yoga mat that we have, or all these other things that we could potentially do to meet that very real need for physical activity. And that's where the work is, right? And that's where the discipline in an emotionally healthy way comes in. Helping them look within, identify their needs and meet their needs, and over time learn not only us meeting their needs, but us teaching them how to meet their own needs in more appropriate pro-social ways that are, safe for everyone.
I love it. It's like modeling that pro-social behavior and also giving them the tools to recognize what's happening in my body right now. And
Right.
I completely resonate with that. And when we talk about mindful living, everything that you're talking about is mindful living, where it's that thought too, right? As an educator, to pause for a moment and what is their body language? What is their communication? What is this trying to show me from, it's almost like you have to become this like detective, right? It's like thinking a couple steps ahead and pulling back the layers to go, what exactly is being shown here? And I love to connect with the attention piece, right? If that child is not getting what they need in any way, physically, emotionally, social and emotionally, they're going to show up in a way where, it might trigger us as an educator. It might trigger us to say, oh, or we have that reaction piece. But to pause for a moment and have that awareness to question, what are they trying to show me right now? And to just have that underlining tool, to have that awareness prior to responding or reacting, gives that discovery piece of, oh, and knowing that these children are biggest teachers, right? They're supporting us also reshaping the way that we've experienced our childhood, which I think is super powerful as an educator or as a parent, to know that their lessons are also a mirror for something inside of us that we can discover again. So I
Yes.
absolutely love everything that you're saying. I mean, we could sit here and talk all day. I really appreciate your time, Chazz, and all the work that you're doing out in the world. If there was one extra piece to kind of bundle up in a bow for our listeners today, what would that be as they kind of walk away after our conversation?
Don't be a perfectionist, be an improvementist. The goal isn't to be perfect every day. The goal is to improve a little every day.
Love that. Thank you. Thank you, Chazz Lewis. Thank you, all of our listeners, for watching today. And I hope you enjoyed our conversation.
Bye.
Bye.